I got home and heard moans coming from our bedroom, ragged, breathless, the kind that slice right through a man's ribs before he even knows what's happening. I twisted the knob. Locked. From the inside. In the house I paid for. In the room where I'd kept every anniversary card we ever wrote each other. 7 minutes later, my whole marriage, 30 years of it, was over. I won't tell you the whole scene yet. You aren't ready for it, and I'm not ready to relive it all in the first breath. But I'll tell you this much: the moment that lock didn't turn, something in me cracked. Something old. Something that had taken a lifetime to build. If you're watching this, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in America you're hearing the start of my revenge story. I'm 60 years old, and it still shocks me how far the truth can travel. I want to know which state, which town, which quiet living room is hearing what happened to me that Tuesday afternoon. My name is Daniel Whitford. I'm talking to you from a small apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. The ceiling paint's peeling, the pipes hiss in winter, and the landlord's always checking on something. But it's mine. And when you're starting over at 60, mine matters more than you'd think. Now, before I drag you into that hallway, before the door, the shouts, the betrayal, let me take you back. Because the truth is, what happened that afternoon didn't start on a Tuesday. It started decades earlier in a different world entirely. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, back when neighborhoods still smelled like cut grass and gasoline, and every dad on the block owned at least one tool he knew how to use better than anyone else. Our house sat 2 turns off a county road, a squat yellow thing with chipped siding and a screen door that slammed hard enough to wake the dead. Dad, Jake Whitford, was a mechanic at Ray's Auto. Big hands, quiet eyes, a man who never wasted a word. He'd step out the door before the sun had even committed to rising, lunchbox in hand, steel-toe boots thumping against the wooden steps. And every night, he'd come home with that same slow, dragging walk, smelling like motor oil, sweat, and cigarettes he pretended Mom didn't know about. Mom Hannah was the backbone, the way women back then often were. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. Always steady. She went to church every Sunday and knew exactly how long to leave cornbread in the cast-iron skillet so it got that perfect crisp on the edges. She wasn't a saint she could scold a kid into next week, but she carried herself with this quiet dignity that made you believe in things like family and faith and sticking by the people you chose. We weren't rich, not even close. Some weeks were tighter than others. But on Sunday nights after church, we'd all sit around that scarred wooden table and eat pot roast so tender it practically surrendered under the fork. Mashed potatoes whipped to a cloud. Green beans that snapped right between your teeth. And the house crowded, loud, chaotic. With 6 kids would feel like the warmest place on earth. That's the environment I grew up in. Not perfect, just real. I was the 4th of 6, 3 boys, 3 girls, a full house. Someone was always yelling about whose turn it was to chop wood, who stole whose baseball glove, who tracked mud across the kitchen floor. But in between all that, there was laughter. Backyard football games. Fishing down at the small pond behind Mr. Dalton's farm. Long summer nights, trying to catch lightning bugs in jars, until Mom hollered that we'd get eaten alive by mosquitoes. Those were the days that built me. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just good. And the thing that stuck with me the most, the thing that shaped the kind of man I became, was Dad's code. He didn't teach it formally. He didn't sit me down and give me speeches. He lived it. Every day. Without exception. A man's word, he said once, tapping his chest with a wrench-stained finger, is his backbone. Lose it, and you'll never stand tall again. I took that to heart. I took it so deep inside me that it turned into the lens I saw the world through even decades later, even when that belief became the very thing that broke me. Mom trusted Dad. the way people don't trust each other anymore. He'd stay late at the shop overtime hours, broken down engines, emergency fix-it fees, and not once did she check his pockets, his phone, his stories. She trusted him because in her world, in her generation, a man who came home tired and hungry was a man who'd given everything he had. That was marriage to me. That was loyalty. That was the model I carried into adulthood. When I was 13, I got my first job, sweeping floors at Brewer's Auto Parts. The shop smelled like rubber and hot metal and salty fries from the diner next door. I made $5 a day and poured every bit of it into Mom's ceramic chicken jar on the top shelf. She said she was saving it for someday, and I was proud of every crumpled bill I added to it. I learned early the dignity of work. That money earned from sweat felt different from money handed to you. That showing up mattered even when you were tired, even when your friends were out swimming at the quarry. Those habits, they stick. They become your bones. And maybe that was my curse later in life, believing everyone lived by the same rules. I can still remember the smell of that summer evening, the one that changed everything, without me knowing it yet. I was 17, sunburnt, from a long day at the shop, sweat dry on my shirt, and Brewer had just sent us home early because the heat was making everyone stupid. The church down the road was hosting a community BBQ, smoke drifting over the parking lot like a welcome sign. Kids running, old ladies gossiping, men arguing about the Cowboys' chances that year. I grabbed a plate of ribs and leaned against a picnic table, just trying to cool off. And that's when I saw her. Linda Parrish, the girl in the yellow sundress. She walked through the crowd like she wasn't aware every pair of eyes turned in her direction. Sunlight caught the strands of her hair. Her laugh floated across the yard like it had no weight at all. I remember wiping my hands on my jeans and staring at her longer than any polite teenage boy should. If I'd known that the girl in that sundress would one day be the woman who shattered me, maybe I would have looked away. But I didn't. I can still remember the exact second Linda Parker turned toward me at that church BBQ like somebody spun a spotlight right onto her. She was 18 then, with that soft brown blonde hair that curled toward her shoulders, sun-kissed skin from working part-time at the county pool, and a smile that could have made a preacher forget his sermon. She held a paper cup of lemonade, tapping the rim with her finger, like she was trying to drum up the courage for something. Truth is, I was the one who needed courage. "Hey," I said. That was all I managed. One word. Sounded like it got stuck halfway out of my throat. But she laughed this bright little laugh and said, "Hey yourself." And our whole story started right there, between the smell of ribs and sweet corn and July heat. Linda told me she liked to draw mostly flowers, old barns, people she found interesting. Said she dreamed of leaving Tulsa someday, maybe moving somewhere with bigger skies, or a city where art wasn't just something you did at kitchen tables. She talked fast, hands moving, eyes shining. I remember thinking that someone like her shouldn't even be talking to someone like me, a kid who smelled like engine grease and lived in hand-me-down boots. But she kept talking, and I kept listening, and time slipped right out from under us. Our early years were nothing fancy. People these days think love needs big gestures, expensive dinners, flights to places with names they can't pronounce. But Linda and I built ours on soda cans, parking lots, and whatever music drifted from the radio of my old Ford pickup. Most nights, we'd meet behind the grocery store on 49th, the one with the flickering streetlight. She'd hop into my truck with a bag of fries we split right down the middle, and we'd sit facing forward, eating out of the same greasy paper pouch, while the sun dipped behind the Safeway sign. Some nights we'd talk about nothing, school gossip, annoying co-workers, which teacher had lost their mind that week. Other nights we'd talk about everything. future apartments, possible baby names, places we wanted to see. She'd tell me, Danny, I'm not staying in Tulsa forever. I want to see real seasons. Snow. Trees that actually change colors. I don't want to fry to death every July. And I'd tell her, half joking, well, don't forget me when you leave. She'd lean her head on my shoulder and say, I'm not going anywhere without you. There's a moment in every young man's life when he feels like he's holding something he doesn't quite deserve, like he's living on borrowed luck. That's how I felt with Linda. Like I'd somehow won a lottery I didn't even buy a ticket for. So when she said yes, the night I proposed kneeling on gravel behind the county fairgrounds, ring crooked because I'd bought it with tip money, I swear to God, I felt like the richest man in Oklahoma. Our wedding wasn't much by today's standards. The church smelled like old hymn books and lemon cleaner. My brothers wore mismatched suits, her veil snagged on a pew. The photographer canceled last minute, so half our wedding photos were taken by a cousin with shaky hands. We didn't have a honeymoon either. Couldn't afford it. We spent our wedding night at a roadside motel off Route 66, thin towels buzzing AC unit, the whole thing. The sheets were scratchy and the mattress dipped in the middle, but I remember lying there thinking I had everything a man could ever want. I had a wife. I had a future. I had someone who looked at me like I mattered. And for a while, years actually, life felt warm, simple, right? We left Tulsa about a year after the wedding. I'd gotten word there were better paying jobs in Columbus, Ohio, and Linda didn't hesitate. She packed everything we owned, mostly hand-me-downs, chipped plates, cheap towels, and said, let's go, Danny. It's time. I landed a job with a regional auto parts distributor. Started in sales, long hours, lots of miles on the road. Worked my way up to territory manager. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and then some. Linda worked as a cashier at a local supermarket. Hated the uniform, loved the customers. But when she got pregnant with our first, she quit. We decided together she'd stay home. It wasn't a fancy plan, just felt like the right thing for our family. Our first child, Michael, was quiet from the start. Serious eyes, calm baby, the kind who looked like he was studying the world. He grew up steady, thoughtful, a kid who turned into the type of man any father would be proud of. Ended up in Seattle as a software engineer. Still calls me every Sunday. 2 years later came Emily, loud, creative, stubborn as hell. She finger-painted on walls, glued macaroni to the TV remote, and insisted on wearing tutus to preschool. She grew into this beautiful, strong woman who became a nurse and later a single mom. Life hit her hard, but she didn't break. She's got that Whitford backbone. Raising them wasn't easy. We had years where our checking account clung to life support. Years where the only vacations we took were trips to the free zoo days downtown. Years when the old furnace groaned and we prayed it would survive another winter. I drove all over Ohio, Cincinnati, Dayton, Akron, Toledo, closing deals, delivering parts, shaking hands until my knuckles felt like gravel. I'd get home so tired some nights that I'd fall asleep in my work boots. But every time I walked through that door, I'd see Linda with a baby on her hip. Spaghetti on the stove, bills spread across the counter, doing the kind of labor nobody pays for and nobody truly notices. I thanked her in my head 1,000 times. But out loud, not nearly enough. Funny how men can love deeply, yet forget to say the words. We bought our first house when I was 32. A 2-story in a quiet Columbus suburb. Beige siding, creaky porch, a yard so small you could mow it with scissors. The mortgage terrified us. We clipped coupons, ate frozen meals, fixed everything ourselves because calling a plumber was out of the question. But the day the realtor handed us the keys, Linda stepped onto that front porch, touched the railing like it was something holy, and said, "We made it, Danny." And I believed her. I believed we had crossed into some permanent happiness, a future that couldn't be shaken, a marriage built from nothing but sweat, loyalty, and love. Back then, I truly thought that porch would be where we'd grow old together, gray hair, rocking chairs, grandkids running through the yard. But life has a way of rewriting plans without your permission. I thought that porch would be where we'd grow old together. I was wrong. If you've ever raised kids, you know there are years when the house feels like a living creature, breathing, stomping, shouting, laughing, full from wall to wall with life. That's how ours was. A 4-person circus, a warm one, a loud one, a good one. Those were the years I didn't know I should have been paying closer attention. Back when Michael and Emily were little, our backyard was basically a second living room. Summers meant barbecue smoke, curling into the twilight, kids chasing each other with water guns, Linda waving a spatula at me because I always burned the burgers. Michael learned to throw a football back there, learned to change his first tire, with my hands guiding his. Emily covered the driveway in chalk drawings, flowers, mermaids, lopsided, smiling suns that stayed on the concrete until the rain washed them away. On Friday nights, we'd pile into the living room with a pizza too big for the coffee table and watch football, Emily pretending to understand Michael, shouting at the TV, Linda curled up next to me. Those were the nights when exhaustion from work melted off me the minute I stepped into that room. That's what family used to be. Noise, clutter, warmth. But life doesn't stay in one season, and neither did we. My job started shifting in ways I didn't see coming. Sales targets went up every quarter. Travel increased. Meetings got longer. Clients got harder to please. I was on the road 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Cheap hotels, gas station dinners, spreadsheets glowing off a laptop at midnight. Every time I felt guilt creep in, I'd tell myself the same line. I'm doing this for them. For the mortgage. For college funds. For retirement. For safety. The American checklist. I didn't see what it was costing. Linda never complained, never once accused me of choosing work over family. But I could feel the way she slowly folded in on herself, like someone who'd gotten used to standing at the back of the room. She'd once dreamed of making art, of painting, sketching, maybe teaching classes at a community center someday. But kids came, bills came, life came. And that dream she talked about when she was 18 turned into something she kept tucked inside a drawer somewhere. She poured everything into being a mother, a homemaker, a wife. And I thanked her, silently, in my mind. I rarely said it out loud. I should have. God, I should have. Time passed like it always does. Michael graduated, got a job in Seattle, and left home with a backpack and a laptop, promising to call every Sunday. Emily moved to Cleveland with her husband after nursing school. The house that once shook with noise got quiet. Not at once, but slowly, like a faucet being turned tighter each month. Then the marriage Emily had rushed into fell apart. She came back to Columbus for a while, heartbroken, angry, trying to pull her life back together. For a few months, the house breathed again, like an old beast remembering its strength. But she was young. She moved out again into a place of her own, determined to stand on her own 2 feet. And then it was just us. Just me and Linda, 2 people sitting in a house built for 4. It's funny or tragic or both, how silence has weight. And ours got heavier every week. One night, Linda was washing dishes, water running her shoulders tight. She said quietly, "We don't even know each other anymore, Danny." I pretended not to hear. A cowardly thing to do, but I did it. Another night, she said, "We haven't really talked in years." I told her she was being dramatic. I told her this was normal. Empty nest. Everybody goes through it. People our age are supposed to be a little distant, a little tired. It's life. Truth is, I just didn't want to face how right she was. Around that same time, My company started going through restructuring, the kind of word that makes grown men sweat. Meetings behind closed doors. Rumors of layoffs. Everyone whispering about 401ks and pension cuts like they were discussing the weather. My blood pressure shot up. Doctor put me on meds. Some nights, I'd lie awake thinking about money, about the mortgage, retirement, medical bills. What would happen if my heart gave out in my sleep someday? Stress became my closest companion. I wasn't much of a husband in those years. I was a paycheck with a pulse. I don't say that proudly. I say it because it's true. That's when Tom came into the picture more clearly. He'd always been around my closest coworker, 30 years in the trenches together, surviving every lousy corporate decision, side by side. Tom was funny, sharp, brutally honest, divorced twice, called himself the ghost of Christmas future for every married man in the office. One night after a miserable sales meeting, he looked at me over a beer and said, "You think you're building for retirement, Danny. But if you don't look at your marriage, you might retire a felony." I laughed it off. I told him he was projecting. I said Linda and I were fine. He shook his head. No marriage collapses overnight. It rots from the inside, while both people pretend not to smell it. I should have listened. I didn't. Evenings at home turned into two separate universes. Linda would sit in the living room, watching some home renovation show wrapped in a blanket, the volume low. And I'd be in the garage drinking a lukewarm beer beside the old workbench, cleaning tools I didn't actually need to clean. It felt easier than sitting next to her in silence, both of us pretending nothing was wrong. We stopped saying goodnight. We stopped touching. We stopped being us. We were two ghosts haunting the same house. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Linda began to change. First, she signed up for a yoga class at a studio downtown, said she wanted to try something new. Then she bought a sketchbook, started drawing again, flowers, faces, lines that looked like feelings more than shapes. Next came the haircut, shorter, lighter, stylish, in a way that made her look 10 years younger. She bought new clothes too, colors she'd never worn, dresses that fit just right. Shoes she definitely wasn't wearing around the house. She'd say, "I'm going out for a bit," grabbing her purse, perfume trailing behind her. I'd kiss her on the cheek, tell her she looked beautiful. And I meant it. Genuinely. I thought she was blooming again. I thought she was reclaiming pieces of herself she'd buried for decades. I thought she was finally doing something just for her. But I didn't realize something far darker. She wasn't only doing something for herself. She was doing someone else. Travis Miller moved into the blue two-story house next door on a windy Saturday morning, the kind of Ohio morning where the ski looks like wet steel and the air tastes like snow. I remember standing on my porch, coffee steaming in my hand, watching a U-Haul back up crooked into his driveway. Out jumped this young guy, maybe 33, 34, broad shoulders, gym bag slung over one arm, baseball cap turned backward, like he still thought he was 20. He carried everything himself, boxy foxes, dumbbells, a folded squat rack, like the whole move was just another workout routine. When he spotted me, he jogged over and said, "Good morning, sir. I'm Travis. Just moved in." Sir. That word hits different when you're over 50. Respectful, polite. A nice kid. That was my first impression. A few days later, after an early winter storm, I was outside hauling a 50-pound bag of ice melt toward the garage. My back was already protesting my breath, fogging the air when I heard, "You need a hand." Mr. Whitford, there he came, Travis bare-armed in the cold like it didn't bother him. And before I could answer, he grabbed the other end of the bag, as if it weighed nothing. He smiled, teeth white enough to star in a toothpaste commercial, and said, "Can't let my elders break their backs out here." I laughed. He meant well. At that moment, I was glad to have a younger man next door. Somebody strong, friendly. The kind of neighbor you help move a couch for. The kind you loan power tools to without a second thought. It started small, the interactions between Linda and Travis. Too small for suspicion. Small enough for a man like me, raised on loyalty and trust, to explain away. One afternoon I came home and saw Travis tightening the hinges on our screen door. Linda stood beside him holding a glass of iced tea, laughing at something he said. Oh, she told me Travis noticed the door was dragging, so he offered to fix it. Seemed harmless. Practical. Neighborly. A week later, I found out she'd baked banana bread and brought some over to thank him. Again, nothing strange on the surface. Then came the evenings, where I'd look out the window and see the two of them sitting on our front porch, drinking tea, talking like old friends. Travis leaning back in the chair, forearms crossed. Linda brushing hair behind her ear, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. But I told myself she was just being kind. Linda had always been warm with people. It was one of the things I loved about her when we were young. And Travis was young, alone, probably lonely. That's what I kept believing. Because believing anything else meant admitting something was breaking. And Linda, she changed unmistakably. New clothes, brighter colors, blouses that fit just right. Perfume I didn't recognize. Sharp, floral, expensive. She said it was part of the new art class vibe. Her makeup, new shades, her hair styled with intention. Her evenings suddenly full. I'm going to drawing class. I'm grabbing coffee with the girls. I'm running errands. Each statement came with a smile. Each smile came with just enough distance to make me wonder. But every time doubt crept in, I slammed the door shut on it. She's finally living a little, I told myself. After years of kids and bills and routines, she's rediscovering herself. This is good. This is healthy. But you can convince yourself of anything if you are tired enough and afraid enough. The first crack appeared on a Thursday evening. I'd cut a work trip short. Client canceled last minute, so I got home 2 hours early. Linda's car wasn't in the driveway. The kitchen lights were off. Silence filled the house. But when I stepped back outside to grab a package, I noticed something light flickering through Travis's kitchen window. Curtains half open. I heard laughter. A woman's laughter. Soft, warm, familiar. I froze. It felt like my nerves were being tuned like guitar strings. Maybe it wasn't her, I thought. Maybe the TV's on. Maybe he's on a call. Maybe. An hour later, Linda walked through the front door, flushed cheeks, fresh makeup, smelling like the same perfume drifting faintly from Travis's backyard earlier. Dinner with the girls from art class, she said, hanging her bag on the chair. I nodded. I swallowed. I didn't ask a damn thing. Because a man raised on never question your wife swallows his dread like medicine, bitter, necessary, silent. That night, lying in bed, she scrolled her phone with her screen turned away from me. Her breathing was easy. Mine wasn't. It was the first time I felt like I didn't belong in my own home. Like I was a visitor. Like the walls had started shifting around me. But I pushed it down hard. Then came the night everything inside me shifted. Linda was in the shower, steam curling under the bathroom door. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, just as her phone left on the table started buzzing. Once, twice, 3 times, the name flashing across the screen. T. Miller. Jim, a heart. Next to his name. My stomach dropped like a stone into cold water. I didn't touch the phone. Didn't move closer. Didn't open a single message. I just stood there staring at it, listening to the buzzing fade replaced by the sound of running water from the shower, her shower, our shower. And in that silence, something inside me finally acknowledged what my mind had been refusing for months. The enemy wasn't outside my house. He was 20 feet away, and I'd been shaking his hand. The thing about denial is, that it doesn't break all at once. It cracks quietly, slowly, like ice thinning under your feet. You don't fall through until you're right in the middle of the lake. For me, the first crack came from a place as unromantic as it gets, a bank statement. I was sitting at the dining table one Tuesday morning, coffee going cold, sorting through mail, the kind of boring adult chores you tell yourself you'll finish in five minutes, but end up drowning in for half an hour. Linda's envelopes mixed with mine, medical reminders, coupons nobody uses anymore. Then I saw it, a charge from a yoga studio downtown. Not the small affordable one she'd mentioned. A high-end place with glass walls, valet parking, and classes that cost more than my weekly gas bill. At first I told myself, maybe she tried a new class. Women do that. People do that. Nothing strange. Then came the next charge on the list, a restaurant in the short north. I'd never been there. Linda had never mentioned going. I stared at the statement long enough for the print to blur. My heartbeat started crawling into my throat. But I folded the paper, tucked it into a drawer, and whispered to myself, "It's nothing. Don't be paranoid." That was crack number 1. Crack number 2 came softer. Linda started leaving the house without her wedding ring. Simple as that. Sometimes she said she forgot. Sometimes she said her fingers were swollen from the weather. Sometimes she didn't say anything at all. Funny how symbols don't matter until they do. I also noticed Travis's patterns. Man had a rhythm. Whenever I pulled out of the driveway for work around 7:30, his garage would open. Every single time. When I got home late 9:10, he'd be returning too, headlights sweeping across the lawn, as if he'd been timing it. There's no textbook on how to catch betrayal, but your gut knows what your brain refuses to admit. Still, I kept telling myself I was imagining it. Then came the evening that changed the temperature in my bloodstream. Tom dropped by unexpectedly with a six-pack, the way old friends do when they sense you're losing pieces of yourself. We sat in the garage, feet up on an old crate, talking about work, retirement, the price of everything these days. It was close to sunset when Tom tilted his beer toward the fence and said quietly, "Is that Linda?" I turned. There she was, standing at our fence line, with Travis' faces close, bodies angled inward, like two plants leaning toward sunlight. She touched her hair. He laughed softly. No physical contact, but the space between them was intimate in a way that made the back of my neck go cold. They didn't see us. Tom narrowed his eyes. "You sure about that guy?" I snapped. "Tom, don't start. You're reading too much into nothing." He raised a brow but didn't push. He didn't need to. I'd already heard what he didn't say. The moment they walked away from each other, I felt the beer sour in my stomach. Crack number 3. Sleep deserted me after that. Every night, I'd close my eyes and see flashes, Linda walking toward Travis's house, Travis's face too close, the glow of their silhouettes at the fence line. Sometimes I dreamed worse, dreamed our bedroom was empty, the sheets cold, and a single wedding ring sat on the pillow, like a confession left behind. I'd wake up sweaty, pulse racing, the silence in the room so thick it felt like a third presence. But every morning when sunlight filled the house again, I convinced myself to stop being dramatic. That's the power of wanting to believe the best in someone. You become an accomplice to your own blind spots. The fourth crack wasn't subtle. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't something I could explain away. I was folding laundry, my shirts, Linda's blouses, trying to keep busy on a Saturday morning. There was a drawer I rarely opened, her personal one. I wasn't snooping, just putting away a stack of her sweaters. A piece of paper slipped out from between them, a small folded note. My fingers hesitated. Something in me knew this was a moment, dividing life into before and after. I opened it. Today felt like being 20 again. "Thank you," T. Travis. I reread it 3 times, eyes burning, breath hitching. My hands shook so hard the edges of the paper trembled like leaves in wind. That would have been enough to break most men. But the universe wasn't done with me. Folded underneath the note was a receipt, a hotel receipt. Downtown Columbus. Paid with a secondary card linked to our joint account. Dated last month. A Saturday I remembered clearly, because she'd claimed she had an all-day art intensive. My knees buckled. I sat on the edge of the bed, note in one hand, receipt in the other, feeling like I was holding evidence from a crime scene. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something. I wanted it now to be real. But the worst thing, the absolute worst, was the instinct that rose up in me. Maybe there's another explanation. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe. Hope is cruel when it masks truth. That night, Linda sat down across from me at dinner, stirring her pasta, watching me too closely. "You've been quiet lately," she said. Then she added a twist of the knife. "Is there someone else? Someone at work? You've been distant." I nearly choked. She was cheating on me. And she was asking if I had someone else. It was gaslighting, so clean, so practiced, it stole the air from my lungs. All I could do was shake my head. Words wouldn't come. I felt like if I opened my mouth, the pain would pour out in a scream. She reached for my hand. I moved mine away. Her face twisted, offended, like I had betrayed her. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I couldn't stay in this fog anymore. Couldn't keep living half blind, half denying. I needed truth. Real truth. Proof. Not assumptions. Not suspicions. Not dreams. Proof. Tom came over again the next day, sensing something had shifted in my voice when I called him. "Danny," he said after I told him about the receipt, "if you're gonna do something about this, don't go kicking doors open or fighting people. Don't get yourself arrested. If you suspect, do it the right way. Legally. Clean." Clean sounded impossible with the kind of dirt clogging my chest, but I nodded. I wasn't just a betrayed husband now. I was a man preparing for war. Sunday morning after church, I stayed behind while the crowd filtered out. There was someone I needed. Jeff Marlowe. Retired cop. A man who'd seen enough ugliness to know exactly how to sniff out truth. He shook my hand, looked me in the eye and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." I told him everything. The yoga studio, the perfume, the note, the receipt, the laughter next door. He listened quietly, thumb stroking his chin, eyes steady. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "Daniel," he said, "if you're gonna go looking for the truth, be ready to live with it." Those words didn't scare me. They didn't even slow me down. They lit the fuse. Jeff didn't waste words. He never had. "Keep it legal," he told me. "Keep your hands clean. And if you go looking for truth, Danny, be ready to live with it." Those words stayed with me like a weight in my chest. As I sat in my truck outside Best Buy, the next morning staring at a tiny box that held the smallest camera I'd ever seen. "Legal to place inside your own home," Jeff reminded me. "Living room, hallway, staircase, fine. Bedroom, absolutely not." I wasn't there to be a pervert. I wasn't even there to spy. I was there to survive. And men who are drowning grab on to whatever will keep them afloat. That night, after Linda went to bed early, claiming she had a headache, eyes too bright for the lie, I stayed downstairs finishing some work. In reality, I was installing that camera on the bookshelf in the living room, angled at the staircase and the front door. A perfect shot. Completely lawful. My hands shook more than I wanted to admit. Before turning in, I packed a small suitcase and tossed it by the door. Printed out a fake itinerary from my work email. Jeff had warned me to create normalcy. My company was going through restructuring, and overnight trips were common. Nothing suspicious. At dinner earlier, Linda had asked, which hotel again? Not in a curious wife's way. Not casual. No, her voice held something like anticipation. I answered calmly, almost too calmly, Marriott by the river. Her eyes flickered. She smiled a thin, closed-lip smile. I didn't eat much that night. Neither did she. The next morning, I carried my suitcase out, gave her a kiss on the cheek, her skin cold, distant, and drove off like a man rehearsing his own alibi. I made it 3 blocks before pulling into the parking lot of a Kroger, parked between 2 SUVs, heart hammering, hands damp on the steering wheel. I waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Finally, I opened the camera app. The screen lit up with the empty living room, still familiar, innocent. I stared until my eyes burned. 20 minutes passed. Then footsteps. Linda appeared on screen, dressed too nicely for a morning alone at home. Hair curled. Makeup fresh. Blouse I'd never seen before. She kept checking out the window, pacing lightly like someone waiting for a package. Except packages don't ring the doorbell twice. When the door opened, Travis stepped in with a bag of takeout. Smiling. Comfortable. Like he'd been there 100 times already. Linda greeted him with a hug. Not a friendly one. And I've missed you one. My stomach turned into stone. They laughed about something I couldn't hear. He touched her lower back. She didn't move his hand. Then, like a knife twisting slowly, they walked up the stairs out of the camera's view. Hand in hand. I felt cold everywhere, like someone had poured ice water into my chest. I could have driven home that second. Could have kicked down the door and ended it all in one roar. But Jeff's words echoed in my skull. You act with your hands, he'll twist it into an assault charge. Don't give him the chance. So I sat there, in a grocery store parking lot, watching the minutes crawl by like insects. I called Jeff, told him what I saw. His voice stayed level, steady, cop-like. Don't confront them yet. You want clean evidence. Catch them where there's no doubt. But keep your hands to yourself. I can't just sit here, I whispered. You'll do more damage if you don't think, Jeff warned. Wait. Then go home. Don't break anything. Don't touch him. I hung up. Stared at my reflection in the windshield. Didn't recognize the man staring back. After 2 hours of pacing, gripping the steering wheel and trying not to scream, I finally drove back toward the neighborhood, slow, cautious, like someone approaching a crime scene. I parked 2 houses down, turned off the engine. Let the silence swallow me whole. Then I walked, each step heavier than the last. When I reached my yard, I noticed something that shouldn't have been. The front door not fully closed, just slightly ajar. That tiny gap felt like a message. Come on in. See for yourself. I pushed it open. The house was too quiet. Still. As if holding its breath. I could hear my pulse louder than anything else. Up the stairs I went, one step at a time, gripping the railing because my legs didn't feel like they belonged to me anymore. Then halfway up I heard it. A sound no married man should ever hear in his own home. Moans. Rhythmic, undeniable, coming from our bedroom, the one with the photograph of our wedding day, still hanging above the dresser. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Rage, humiliation. 30 years collapsing like a lung. But even then, even with my blood boiling, I didn't break the door. I forced myself to do the right thing. I pounded on it first. Linda opened the door. The sound stopped instantly. A long, terrible silence wrapped around me. Then her voice, shaky, panicked. Danny. Wait, I'm just changing. Wait a second. My fists hit the door again, harder. Open the door. No footsteps, no unlocking, no explanation. Just more lies trying to form behind wood. I stepped back, braced myself, and rammed my shoulder against the door. It cracked. A second hit the frame split. A third the hinge tore loose. The door burst inward. And there it was. Everything I had tried not to believe. The bed destroyed. Sheets twisted. Pillows on the floor. Linda clutching a towel to her chest hair, a mess, face flushed. Danny, it's not what you think. But my eyes had already moved past her. The closet door slightly open. I yanked it wider. There he was. Travis. Shirtless, barely dressed. Hunched like a cornered animal. He looked at me with those big coward eyes. For a moment, no one breathed. Then I said, voice shaking with fury I was barely holding back, "Get out of my house." He stepped out, stumbling, clutching his jeans. But instead of apologizing or leaving, he backed away from me, raising his hands like I was the threat. "Don't hit me, sir," he whimpered. "Don't touch me. I'll call the police." Then before I could even respond, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Right there, in front of us both. "This is Travis Miller," he stammered loud enough for the operator. "I'm at 1439 Ridgeview. There's a violent man here. He threatened me. Please send officers." Linda screamed, "Travis, stop." But he kept talking, fake tears in his voice. I stood there stunned, watching the man who had slept with my wife try to paint me as the aggressor. 30 seconds later, through the open window, I heard it. The distant rise of sirens. Police. Heading straight toward my home. Blue and red lights began flashing across the bedroom wall. I looked into the camera as if talking to the future, to you, and whispered, I thought my heart had already hit rock bottom. I was wrong. It was about to get worse. The police cars screeched to a stop outside my house, lights splashing the windows in frantic red and blue. For a second I couldn't breathe. Not from fear of being arrested, no. That would have been easier. I couldn't breathe because this was humiliation, layered on humiliation. Betrayal in my bedroom, and now the whole damn neighborhood watching law enforcement show up at my door, like I was some violent criminal. 2 officers rushed in, one older, stocky gray mustache, the other young, sharp jawline, eyes, already judging me. Before I said a word, they stopped at the foot of the stairs. Sir, step back, and keep your hands where we can see them. Jeff's voice echoed in my mind, hands in your pockets, always. So I did, slowly, deliberately. I put both hands in my pockets and stepped back from the broken bedroom door, as if crossing a line I would never return over. The young officer moved first. He looked at the shattered frame, the splintered wood, my heaving chest. Then he saw Linda wrapped in a towel, shaking, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and Travis shirtless, dramatically holding his chest like he'd survived a hurricane. He tried to kill me, Travis gasped, pointing at me. He was screaming. He broke the door. He threatened me. That's a lie, I said, steady. Too steady. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like a man standing outside his own life. The older officer held up a hand. Everybody calm down. We're going to separate you. Ma'am, step aside. Young man, go over there. Sir, stay put. The young officer took Travis into the hallway, whispering with him, nodding sympathetically. That stung more than I expected. Travis looked like the victim, half-dressed, trembling, 20-something, athletic build, now shaking like a frightened puppy. Meanwhile, I looked like the bad guy, 60, exhausted, furious, standing beside a broken door. Linda sobbed into her hands. Danny, please just listen. This wasn't, but I ignored her. I addressed the officers. I came home early. I found my neighbor, this man, pointed at Travis, without moving my hands in bed with my C. I didn't touch him. I didn't lay a hand on either of them. I only broke the door because they refused to open it. The young cop scoffed. You can't just break down a door and threaten someone. I didn't threaten him, I said, still calm. I told him to get out of my house. Travis yelled from behind the officer. He charged at me. He said he'd beat me to death. I felt something hot rise inside my chest, but I forced it back down. If I so much as flinched, that kid would win. The young officer was clearly buying Travis's story. The older one, his eyes told a different story, one that said, something here ain't adding up. But neither could act based on instinct. Then suddenly, a voice from the hallway. Officers, Mrs. Ramirez. Our 70-year-old widowed neighbor was hobbling across my front yard in slippers and a coat thrown over her nightgown. Her hair was half-pinned, her glasses crooked, her breath visible in the cold air. I saw what happened, she shouted before anyone could stop her. The older officer turned sharply. Ma'am, please stay back. No, she insisted, pushing past the doorway. I live across the street. I've seen that man. She pointed directly at Travis, who shrank like a scolded child, walk into this house too many times when the husband was gone. The room went silent. And I didn't hear any fighting today, she continued. Not until Daniel started banging on that door upstairs. Before that, all I heard was, ah, well. She blushed. You know what I heard. Even the officers looked away for a moment. And if you need proof, she said, catching her breath, I have it. My doorbell camera caught him coming over this morning, stumbling, laughing. He looked mighty comfortable walking into a married woman's house. That landed like a hammer. The older officer exchanged a long look with the younger one. Let's see the footage, he said. 10 minutes later, everyone stood in my living room as Mrs. Ramirez played the clip from her phone. There was Travis walking up my driveway, carrying takeout, stopping to adjust his shirt like he was preparing for a date. He knocked once. Linda opened the door, hair done, makeup flawless, and smiled in a way I'd never seen her smile at me in years. Then she let him in. Voluntarily, cheerfully. No fear, no hesitation, no sign of danger. The older officer turned slowly toward Travis, eyes narrowing. You told us he forced his way in. But from this looks like you came here willingly. Travis's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't. I mean, she said, but Linda buried her face in her towel, sobbing harder. The young officer shifted uncomfortably. His confidence evaporated. The older one sighed. All right, nobody's getting arrested tonight. I'll file a domestic disturbance report, but that's it. You all need to handle the rest through lawyers. Travis took off like the coward he was, barely got his shoes on, practically running out the door and across the yard to his house. Didn't even look back. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, numb. The officers left. The lights faded. The sirens died in the distance. The house felt hollow. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, stuffed it with whatever clothes I could reach. Linda followed me, crying into her towel, begging, pleading. Danny, please don't leave like this. Please listen. Please let me explain. But I didn't look at her. I slung the bag over my shoulder and said, I'm done. You'll hear from my lawyer. Then I walked out. I drove across Columbus, barely seeing the road through the blur of tears. The humiliation hit me in waves. 1 minute, I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers cramped. The next, my vision blurred, and I had to pull over, chest heaving. I didn't feel like a husband, or a man, or anything. When I finally reached Emily's apartment, she opened the door before I could knock twice. One look at my face, and she gasped. Dad, oh my God. I broke. Right there in her doorway, I broke. She hugged me like she used to when she was 5 and afraid of thunderstorms. Later that night, after I'd told her everything, she said quietly, Dad, we need to check the bank account. I didn't want to. I didn't want another wound. But she insisted. We logged into the joint account. The numbers loaded. And my world shifted again. Over 40,000 missing, withdrawn, slowly, carefully disguised under home repairs training sessions, spa visits. Emily scrolled further, her hands shaking. Dad, look. There it was. A refinance application for our mortgage. A huge new loan. Signed with my name. Except, it wasn't my signature. It was hers. A sloppy imitation. A forged future. Emily slammed the laptop shut, tears in her eyes. Dad, she's stealing from you. I leaned back on the sofa, feeling older than 60, older than any age I'd ever imagined. I thought finding her with another man broke me, I whispered. Then I opened my eyes and stared into the dark. But seeing those numbers on the screen, that almost broke my future. If you've never been through a divorce at 60, I'll tell you this. It feels less like signing papers and more like walking barefoot across broken glass. Every step cuts you. Every answer twists a knife. And nothing happens fast. 2 days after the whole disaster, Emily handed me a business card. Karen Mitchell, family law and financial abuse specialist. Dad, she said softly, you need someone who knows how these cases play out. Mom didn't just cheat. She stole from you. I didn't want to call. Reaching out felt like admitting my marriage had truly died. But I dialed anyway. Karen was in her early 50s, short gray bob glasses, and an expression that said she had seen every kind of heartbreak known to man. But there was warmth in her voice, human warmth, not the cold, clinical tone lawyers sometimes hide behind. When I arrived at her office, she didn't greet me with handshakes or formalities. She simply gestured toward a chair and said, "Sit, Daniel. Let's get you protected." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear those words until I felt my eyes burn. Karen started with the basics, firm, clear, no sugarcoating. First, freeze every joint account you legally can. Not tomorrow. Today. If she's already forged one signature, she can forge another. It hit me like a slap. But she wasn't wrong. Next, she continued, call the bank and dispute the refinance application. Tell them the signature isn't yours. They'll pause everything while we investigate. I nodded, swallowing the ache growing in my throat. Then she said, pushing a yellow folder toward me, we gather evidence. Every receipt, every suspicious charge, every message, every recording, every witness. Witness, I asked. Your neighbor, she said. The cop friend. Anyone who saw Travis entering your home while you were gone. She leaned forward. And Daniel, keep your composure. They will try to paint you as the aggressor. Don't give them anything to work with. I wanted to tell her I'd already come close to losing control. But she already knew. Our first real confrontation came a week later in a sterile conference room with fluorescent lights humming above us. Linda sat across the table with her lawyer, a younger woman in a navy suit, with an expression sharp enough to cut glass. Linda looked smaller. Not physically. Emotionally. Eyes sunken, makeup uneven, hands shaking slightly as she adjusted her blouse. But when the lawyer began speaking for her, my wife, my former wife, lifted her chin as if preparing for battle. Linda's lawyer began, Mr. Whitford is a workaholic. Emotionally unavailable. He neglected his wife for years and created an environment of isolation and resentment. Linda sought companionship only after repeated emotional abandonment. I felt my stomach twist. Workaholic, maybe. Emotionally abandoned her. God, if only she knew how many hours I drove home wishing I could fall asleep next to my wife without feeling like strangers. And the lawyer continued on. The night in question, Miss Stacy. Whitford acted violently, breaking down a door, creating a scenario of physical intimidation. Karen didn't flinch. Not even a blink. When it was her turn, she leaned back in her chair and spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had shredded lies for decades. Let's address the narrative, she said. Your client claims emotional neglect. Fine. That can be discussed. But nothing, absolutely nothing, justifies adultery. And we have direct evidence of that adultery. She opened her file. Doorbell camera footage of Travis Miller entering the home while Daniel was away. Receipts for hotel stays. Charges to joint accounts for spa appointments and personal training sessions known to be with Travis. And she slid a paper forward, a refinancing application with a forged signature. Linda stiffened. Her lawyer blinked. That is false, the lawyer snapped. It was a mutual decision. Daniel must have forgotten. Karen cracked a rare cold smile. If he forgot signing away hundreds of thousands of dollars in loan debt, I'll personally drive him to a neurologist. She tapped the paper. Signature doesn't match. We've already requested a handwriting expert. Linda's lawyer tried again. This is an overreaction. These are typical marital misunderstandings. Karen leaned forward, elbows on the table. Let me be clear. If we pursue the financial angle, this becomes a criminal investigation for fraud. If we pursue the adultery angle, my client receives the majority of marital assets under Ohio law. And if we pursue emotional damages, a judge will take into account the humiliation caused by the presence of a younger man in their marital home. Her voice dropped lower. So I suggest we stick to the truth, or we can let a judge sort out the rest. The air in the room turned heavy. Linda swallowed. Her lower lip quivered, but whether from guilt or fear I no longer knew. Outside after the meeting, I sat in Karen's car for a moment, staring at my hands. I never thought I'd see the day I had to prove my own innocence, I whispered. Karen exhaled softly. You're not proving innocence. You're reclaiming your dignity. There's a difference. For the first time since the affair exploded, I felt something like strength. A small flicker, almost too faint to trust. The legal war stretched across months. Hearings, depositions, financial audits. Travis being dragged into questioning, shaking, sweating, terrified of being linked to fraud. In trying to protect himself, he admitted enough inconsistencies to damage Linda's case heavily. My old boss even stepped in, providing sworn testimony that my job was unstable due to downsizing, proving I had no reason to seek a refinance or incur more debt. It was a small mercy, but it felt like someone somewhere still believed in me. Through it all, Linda's defenses cracked piece by piece. Not because I attacked her, but because truth has a way of pulling its own weight. By the time we reached the courtroom for the final ruling, I felt like a man who had aged a decade. My hands no longer trembled. My voice no longer broke. And when I walked into that courtroom, I didn't look at the floor, I looked straight ahead. Linda was already seated. She didn't look up. Or maybe she couldn't. The judge shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and prepared to speak. In that moment, I looked at her one last time, not as my wife, not as my partner, but as a stranger who had once shared my life. And I thought, whatever he's about to say, today is the day I get my life back, or lose it completely. The courtroom was so still you could have heard a pin drop. Even the air felt heavy, like everyone inside was holding the same breath, waiting for the hammer to fall. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked down at the paperwork, then looked up at us, first at me, then at Linda. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Based on the evidence, this court recognizes marital misconduct, specifically adultery, as the primary cause of the dissolution of this marriage. Linda's shoulders jerked, as if the words themselves had weight. The judge continued, "It is further noted that substantial funds from the couple's joint accounts were used inappropriately for personal expenditures unrelated to the marital household. These transactions, coupled with the attempted refinancing under questionable circumstances, raise concerns about financial wrongdoing." He paused, turned the page. The room was silent. As a result, the marital home is awarded to Mr. Daniel Whitford. Additionally, due to the circumstances of the case, Mr. Whitford will retain the larger portion of the retirement accounts. Mrs. Linda Whitford will receive a significantly reduced share. Linda swallowed hard, tears forming before she even blinked. And as for spousal support, the judge said, voice firm, Miss Whitford's request for substantial long-term alimony is denied. A temporary modest support amount is issued, but will terminate after 12 months. A soft gasp came from Linda's side of the table. Her lawyer bowed her head, not out of respect, but out of resignation. When the gavel finally struck, it didn't sound like victory. It sounded like something closing for good. I didn't smile. I didn't pump my fist like some man who'd won. All I felt was a hollow ache and a strange lightness behind my ribs, a sadness and a release intertwined. Linda broke first. You ruined me, she sobbed, as we stood from the table. You ruined my whole life, Danny. For a moment, something inside me shrank, an old reflex, the instinct to comfort her. But it faded as quickly as it came. No, I said quietly, I didn't ruin anything. You made choices. I just stopped paying the price for them. Outside the courthouse, the wind was sharp, November cold, biting through my jacket. I just wanted to walk to my car and leave. But Linda followed. She grabbed my sleeve, tears streaking down her face, mascara-smudged hair sticking to her cheek. Danny, please, I'm begging you, she whispered. We can fix this. We can start over. I wasn't myself. I was lonely. I was emotional. Menopause. Everything hit me at once. Her fingers tightened around my arm. Travis took advantage of that. He twisted things. He made me feel wanted. I was weak. I'm sorry. I'll do anything, therapy, church, counseling. I'll do whatever you want. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I'd once promised a lifetime to. This woman I no longer recognized. Linda, I said softly, I'm not here to punish you. I'm just finally done letting you punish me. Her face crumpled. She let go of my sleeve. And for the first time, I walked away without looking back. Winning in court didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet. Too quiet. I sold the house a few months later. Couldn't bear the ghosts. Every room felt haunted, not by spirits, but by memories I didn't want anymore. I bought a smaller apartment in Columbus. Functional. Quiet. A place where nothing reminded me of us. But even with freedom, even with justice, I fell into a kind of slow gray fog. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in that silent apartment, listening to the hum of the fridge, wondering how the hell a man could spend 30 years building a life, only to end up eating microwave dinners alone. Sleep didn't come easily. Food tasted like cardboard. Retirement felt less like rest and more like being shelved, stored away, somewhere no one needed anymore. Emily called every night. Dad, move in with me for a while. Dad, come stay in Seattle with Michael. Dad, you don't have to be alone. But I didn't want to be someone's burden. Didn't want to invade their lives with my sadness. So I stayed put, trying to find a rhythm, trying to feel like a person again. One Sunday, Emily sent me a link. Divorce support group for seniors. First Baptist Community Center. I didn't want to go. But the apartment was too quiet. Quiet can crush a man if he lets it. The group met in a basement room that smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. A circle of metal chairs. Faces lined with age, exhaustion, fear. The looks of people who had survived something big, but hadn't yet figured out how to live afterward. That's when I saw her. Claire Bennett. 57. Short, wavy silver hair. A quiet presence. Not the kind of beauty that shouts, but the kind that feels steady, warm, lived in. She wore a simple blue sweater and kept her hands folded neatly in her lap. When she talked about losing her husband to cancer, she didn't cry. She spoke the way people do when the pain has become part of their bloodstream. After the meeting, she walked beside me toward the exit. We exchanged small talk, whether parking, how odd it felt to introduce ourselves as divorced or widowed. Nothing romantic, just human. When we stepped outside, a light drizzle had started, cold and patient. Claire opened her umbrella, a small worn yellow one, with a tiny tear near the edge. She glanced at me. "You walking this way?" I nodded. We walked side by side under that too small umbrella, our shoulders brushing occasionally. Neither of us filled the silence. It felt good. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was walking home alone. I didn't know where the road would lead. I didn't know if it was friendship, companionship, or something yet unnamed. But I knew this. It was the first step toward living again. It's been a little over 3 years since the day the judge struck his gavel and closed the chapter I once thought would define the rest of my life. Funny thing is, endings don't feel like endings. When you're inside them, they feel like freefall. But somewhere along the way, without me noticing exactly when, freefall turned into landing. Somewhere soft, somewhere steady, somewhere like Claire. These days our mornings start the same way, quiet, gentle, predictable, in the best possible sense. I wake up first out of habit. There are still nights when an old nightmare claws at me. Locked doors, muffled moans, red-blue police lights flickering on bedroom walls. Trauma ages you in ways birthdays don't. But then I roll over, see Claire's soft silver hair against the pillow, hear her slow breathing, and suddenly, the past feels like nothing more than a bad storm far behind us. Most mornings, she wakes to the smell of coffee black. For me, cinnamon creamer for her. We sit on the tiny balcony of our apartment, overlooking a modest community garden the tenants run. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we don't. At 63, silence has stopped feeling like something to be afraid of. We've built a small ritual together. Saturday mornings, the farmer's market. Sunday afternoons, tending the basil and rosemary Claire proudly calls our little forest. Weekdays, she drags me along to volunteer at a support group for people over 50 going through betrayal, grief, or divorce. At first, I didn't want to speak there. Felt like my story was just a wound with a long echo. But Claire nudged me gently, never pushing too hard. "You don't have to preach, Danny," she'd say. "Just tell the truth. Someone might need it." And she was right. I've seen men cry into their palms because they thought they were alone. I've seen women in their 70s whisper that betrayal feels embarrassing at their age. I've seen people who thought life was over stand up straighter after hearing someone else say, "Me too." Every time I finish telling my story, Claire squeezes my hand. That small gesture does more healing than most people will ever know. My kids. They're the blessing I never lost. Michael still lives in Seattle. Emily's still in Columbus, and they both adore Claire. Maybe because she never tried to replace their mother. She just showed up with kindness and consistency the same way she showed up for me. The grandkids call her Grandma Claire. The first time they said it, she cried in the car on the way home, wiping her cheeks while pretending she got something in her eye. Life isn't exciting in the dramatic sense, not anymore. It's steady, warm, ordinary. And that's exactly what my heart had been begging for all along. Then came the day I saw Linda again. We were at a hospital where Claire works part-time in family services. I was dropping off her lunch. She'd forgotten it at home. I walked past the waiting area, and there she was. Linda. Thinner. Shoulders caved. Skin dull like grief had washed the color out of her. She was holding medical paperwork, diabetes management, maybe heart issues. I didn't stare. She saw me. Before I saw her. Her face crumpled, guilt, regret, something like shame. It was strange seeing a person who once knew every corner of your life but now looked like a stranger trying to remember which memories she was allowed to keep. "Danny," she whispered, standing up slowly. I nodded. "Linda Seifel?" A long silence stretched between us, heavy, but not bitter. She finally said, "I heard you're doing better. I'm glad for that." Her voice cracked on the word glad. Then softly she added, "I lost a lot, Danny. More than I realized. Not just you. The kids hardly call me. The neighbors won't look me in the eye. And Travis, he left town before the ink on the divorce was dry." There was no anger in her voice anymore. No manipulation. No defiance. Just consequence. She played with the edge of her jacket. "I'm sorry," she said, simple, sincere, stripped of excuses, "not to get you back, not for sympathy. I'm sorry for what I did." For the first time in years, I really heard her. I took a breath and said, "I truly hope you find some peace, Linda. I mean that." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "But whatever we were," I continued, "that's gone. I forgive you. But it's for my sake, not yours." She let out a shaky exhale, maybe relief, maybe heartbreak, and whispered, "That's fair." And that was it. We walked past each other. Two people who once built a life together, now just two lives moving in different directions. Now here I am, sitting in my living room, looking into this camera, talking to you the same way I talk to my group, the same way I talk to the man I used to be. If you're over 50 and listening to this, let me tell you something straight. A long marriage is not a guarantee of loyalty. Being older doesn't mean you stop deserving respect, and you are never ever too old to start again. People act like heartbreak after 50 should come with some sort of expiration date. Like you're too old to hurt, too old to hope, too old to rebuild. That's a lie. At 60, I learned how to protect myself legally. At 61, I learned how to sleep alone without feeling empty. At 62, I learned how to open my heart again, slowly, carefully, honestly. And at 63, I learned the biggest truth of all. Real love is respect. Real love is honesty. Real love is partnership. Quiet, steady, grown-up. Not drama, not secrecy, not locked doors and lies. If you're in pain right now, if your partner betrayed you, if your home feels cold, if you're scared of starting over, listen to me. You are not left over. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not done. Reach out. Tell your kids. Find a lawyer. Join a support group. Walk into a church basement full of strangers if you need to. But don't suffer in silence the way I did. Silence nearly killed me. Connection saved me. And if you're still here listening, well, maybe that's your first step out of the dark. Before I go, do me one favor, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, what city you're in, and what time it is right now. You'd be surprised how many people just like you are sitting in living rooms just like mine, listening at the exact same hours, searching for hope. And I'll leave you with this. Linda chose betrayal. I chose dignity. And I hope truly that if you're over 50 and trying to find your way out, you choose yourself.